Hello, perceptive Scorpio. On August 17, 2026, there may be something beneath the surface of your life asking to be understood rather than rushed. You may feel your heart moving in one direction while outside opinions, responsibilities, and unspoken expectations create a layer of noise around what you already sense deep within yourself. Some of the emotional weight surrounding your relationships may not actually belong to you, and part of your work now is learning to recognize the difference between caring deeply and carrying what another person has refused to carry for themselves. The energy around you feels less like a sudden turning point and more like deep water slowly revealing what has been underneath it all along. A meaningful connection can survive difficult seasons, but it still has to be built on honesty, reciprocity, and the willingness of two people to meet each other emotionally. So the question for you is not simply whether you are committed, Scorpio, but whether you are staying connected to what is real or becoming attached to what you hope the situation will eventually become. If you feel torn between wanting closeness and needing space to breathe, allow yourself to acknowledge both truths without judging either one. What matters is what you do with those feelings once you recognize them. Suppressing them can make them heavier, but analyzing every detail can pull you into a loop where intuition and fear begin to sound almost identical. If you have been giving more emotional energy than you have been receiving, consider stepping back, not to punish someone, create anxiety, or make them chase you, but to stop filling every silence with your own effort. When you stop doing the emotional work for everyone involved, you may begin to see much more clearly what the other person is actually willing to contribute. For someone who has been slow to communicate or hesitant to make their intentions clear, their actions may become easier to read when you stop interpreting their silence for them. You do not have to manufacture a reaction or make someone afraid of losing you. Instead, allow their choices to speak for themselves, because genuine intention becomes much easier to recognize when you are no longer covering the empty spaces with explanations. The shift you are looking for does not have to arrive dramatically. Sometimes it begins with one honest conversation, one boundary, one sincere admission, or one moment when you finally stop pretending that uncertainty feels like security. If there is a breakthrough in this connection, it is likely to feel more meaningful because it grows out of everything that came before it. The tension, the unanswered questions, the misunderstandings, and the moments when you privately wondered whether continuing to hope was worth the emotional cost. The answer may still be yes, but only if both people are willing to participate in what comes next. There can be no lasting intimacy where vague promises continually replace honest communication. And there is very little peace in a relationship where one person has to keep reading between the lines just to understand where they stand. You may notice a different quality in someone's behavior as this situation unfolds. Perhaps a willingness to speak more directly or to acknowledge something that has previously remained unspoken. What matters most is not the appearance of a message, a call, or a dramatic gesture, but whether the action carries substance behind it. Someone showing up with intention is very different from someone appearing simply because they sense you becoming less available. Keep your heart open, but let your boundaries remain intact, because Scorpio, emotional depth does not require you to abandon discernment. Remember that this is a collective reading, so every part of it will not necessarily describe your circumstances exactly. You may recognize yourself in one part while another section feels distant from your present experience, and that is perfectly natural. Let your own intuition decide what deserves your attention rather than forcing every symbol or message to fit your life, because each person moves through change differently and carries a different history into the same emotional landscape. Think of this reading as a space for reflection and perspective, not as an absolute statement about what must happen. As we move through the themes surrounding your relationships, finances, well-being, family connections, work, and personal direction, keep one idea close. Clarity does not always arrive by giving you more information. Sometimes clarity comes when you stop demanding answers from situations that are still revealing themselves. For you, the deeper lesson is learning when to investigate, when to communicate, and when to simply observe what reality is showing you without immediately trying to control the outcome. There is also a symbolic tone around this reading that feels more suited to deep burgundy or dark plum than anything bright or attention-seeking. These colors can represent emotional depth, restrained intensity, self-possession, and the warmth that remains beneath a quiet surface. They are being used here as artistic symbols rather than lucky colors or predictions, reflecting the atmosphere of a Scorpio story in which strength comes from knowing what deserves your energy and what no longer does. A significant project or professional responsibility may require more of your particular strengths than you initially realize. Your ability to notice what other people overlook, examine complicated situations, and recognize patterns beneath the obvious details can become an advantage, especially when you resist the temptation to reveal every part of your strategy too early. You may sometimes question whether your careful approach is slowing you down, but there is a difference between moving slowly because you are afraid and moving deliberately because you are gathering the information you need. Write things down, refine the plan, look beneath the first solution and consider whether another route could serve you better. You may know exactly what you want while still needing to adjust the path that takes you there, and that does not mean you have lost direction. It means you understand that real progress sometimes happens through quieter decisions, careful observation, and the willingness to change your method without abandoning your deeper purpose. You may also discover that your standards make some people uncomfortable. You notice inconsistencies. You remember what was said, and you can sense when something does not quite align, but your challenge is to use that awareness wisely, rather than allowing it to become constant suspicion. Discernment is not the same as distrust. You are allowed to protect what matters to you without assuming that everyone around you has hidden motives, and you are allowed to change your pace without needing everyone else to move according to your expectations. The deeper invitation is to free yourself from whatever has kept you emotionally attached to an old version of the situation. An apology may come from someone who finally understands their part in what happened, and if it does, you can receive it without immediately handing that person access to every vulnerable part of you again. Forgiveness can soften something that has been hard for a long time, but forgiveness does not require you to forget what you learned. Let compassion exist alongside wisdom, especially when your tenderness has already been tested. In love, a complicated situation may begin to feel less tangled as you become more honest with yourself about what you need. The attraction may still be strong, and the bond may still matter, but you are being invited to understand the difference between emotional intensity and emotional safety. You do not have to destroy the mystery surrounding a connection, but neither do you have to live indefinitely inside uncertainty, simply because uncertainty keeps the possibility alive. The Eight of Wands can be read here as movement in communication rather than a promise that a particular message must arrive. Things that have been held back may finally begin to move into words, and information that once felt scattered may start forming a clearer pattern. This could take the shape of a conversation, a meaningful exchange, an unexpected encounter, or simply the realization that changes what you are willing to accept. Stay open, but do not force the current. Allow communication to reveal whether the connection can carry the emotional weight you have been placing on it. The Ten of Cups brings another layer to this story by shifting the focus from intensity toward emotional belonging. For you, fulfillment is not simply about finding someone who creates powerful feelings. It is about being able to feel emotionally safe enough to remain yourself inside the relationship. A connection becomes more meaningful when both people can communicate differences, repair misunderstandings, and create a shared sense of peace without either person having to constantly prove their devotion. That kind of harmony takes patience. Feelings may be powerful, but intensity alone cannot build a sustainable bond, and neither person benefits when pride keeps taking the place of vulnerability. Let the relationship show you what it can become through consistency, shared responsibility, and the quiet choices that happen after the exciting moments have passed. What grows slowly through mutual care often has deeper roots than something that survives only on emotional adrenaline. The Ace of Cups brings the possibility of emotional renewal. Rather than focusing only on whether someone else is choosing you, this card can also represent your willingness to become emotionally available again without abandoning your judgment. You may be rediscovering the part of yourself that can love deeply while still recognizing when something does not feel healthy. And that distinction matters because openness becomes much more powerful when it is paired with self-respect. The star carries the atmosphere of healing after disappointment. If you have spent time protecting yourself because trust once came with a cost, you may be learning that healing does not mean becoming naive again. It means becoming less controlled by what happened before. Hope can return without requiring you to ignore reality, and you can allow yourself to imagine something better while still paying attention to what people actually do. The more honestly you inhabit your own emotional truth, the less you need to perform certainty for anyone else. If a relationship has complicated circumstances around it, the star invites you to step away from fear-based assumptions and look at what is actually possible, appropriate, and healthy. Let optimism exist alongside clear boundaries. You do not need to dim yourself to make a complicated situation easier, but you also do not need to romanticize difficulty simply because the connection feels unusually powerful. Then comes death. And for Scorpio, this symbol deserves particular care. It does not need to mean a literal ending, nor should it become a stereotype about your sign. Instead, it can represent the moment when an old emotional pattern can no longer continue in its previous form. Something about the way you have approached trust, attachment, control, or self-protection may need to change so that a healthier version of intimacy has room to emerge. This transformation may involve releasing a role you have been playing for too long, the person who understands everything without asking the person who waits for someone else to become ready, or the person who quietly absorbs emotional tension so the relationship can continue. Real change asks both people to adjust, and sometimes the most important transformation is realizing that love cannot be sustained by one person's emotional endurance. What opens afterward is not necessarily a new relationship, but a new relationship with yourself and with the standards you bring into every connection. When it comes to your well-being, pay attention to the ways emotional pressure settles into the body. You may notice tension, fatigue, difficulty relaxing, or the physical heaviness that can come from carrying thoughts long after the situation itself has changed. Rather than treating a specific sensation as a prediction, use it as an invitation to slow down, breathe, rest, and notice what your body may be communicating about stress. When emotions remain unspoken for too long, the body sometimes becomes the place where they are felt first. Try not to feed thought patterns that leave you bitter, anxious, or constantly scanning for the next problem. This does not mean pretending everything is positive. It means learning to recognize when reflection has become rumination. Give yourself room to think, but also give yourself permission to stop thinking when there is nothing more to solve in that moment. Small changes in how you rest, breathe, move, and process emotion can gradually create more space inside you. Your professional life also carries an important lesson around discernment. You may have an idea, a strategy, or an observation that deserves recognition, and you should be thoughtful about where and how you present it. Scorpio energy can be particularly effective when it understands the structure of the situation before making a move, so pay attention to who has genuine authority, who has demonstrated integrity, and who can actually help your work reach the place it deserves. At the same time, do not allow caution to turn into isolation. Protecting your ideas is wise. Assuming everyone wants to take advantage of you is another matter entirely. Share strategically, document your contribution, understand the dynamics around you, and let your professionalism speak for itself. You cannot control whether another person is threatened by your progress, but you can control how prepared you are, how clearly you communicate your value, and whether you continue moving toward the work that matters to you. If your current routine has begun to feel repetitive or emotionally empty, listen to that feeling rather than immediately dismissing it. You may not need to make a dramatic change overnight, but you do need to acknowledge when something has stopped giving you a sense of purpose. There can be more than one path ahead, and sometimes you cannot see the right one until you allow yourself to explore beyond the familiar. If you are searching for work or considering a different professional direction, try not to mistake uncertainty for a lack of opportunity. You may have several possibilities in front of you, but your task is to identify which one genuinely aligns with your values, rather than simply choosing the option that looks safest from a distance. Follow what feels meaningful, but combine that instinct with realistic planning, because your intuition becomes much more useful when you give it facts to work with. Sometimes the next step does not have to be monumental. It may simply mean exploring a new environment, learning something unfamiliar, contacting someone you trust, or allowing yourself to consider a path you previously dismissed. Life can still contain adventure without requiring you to abandon your stability. Move with curiosity, remain patient with the process, and let experience teach you what planning alone cannot. Financially, the emphasis is on intentional movement rather than impulsive action. Opportunities may become easier to recognize when you stop allowing old financial habits, emotional obligations, or unnecessary commitments to consume your attention. Before you take a risk, ask whether the decision supports your long-term stability or merely satisfies a short-term emotional impulse. Your intuition can be useful here, especially when paired with practical judgment. Look carefully at what is draining your resources, what commitments still make sense, and where your energy could be redirected more productively. You may find that financial growth begins less with chasing something new and more with releasing what quietly keeps you stuck. There may also be connections that introduce useful professional or financial possibilities, but stay grounded. A compelling opportunity is still worth examining carefully, and enthusiasm should never replace due diligence. Your strongest position comes from combining courage with strategy, allowing your decisions to be deliberate enough that you are building something sustainable rather than simply reacting to momentum. In love, you are unlikely to feel satisfied by a relationship that requires you to constantly question where you stand. You may tolerate complexity for a while because you care deeply and because you want to understand what is happening beneath the surface, but eventually you need emotional honesty. When you are partnered, the relationship may already have a stronger foundation than it once did, particularly if both of you have learned to communicate difficult feelings instead of hiding them. A healthy relationship will still contain challenges. The important question is not whether obstacles exist, but whether the two of you can face them without turning every disagreement into a battle for control. You may have different emotional rhythms, different ways of processing conflict, or different ideas about what security looks like, but mutual adjustment can turn those differences into understanding rather than distance. Love asks both people to participate. That means listening, compromising, admitting when you are wrong, and making room for the other person's experience without immediately defending your own. If the relationship is worth nurturing, you should be able to feel that effort moving in both directions, rather than constantly wondering whether you are the only one keeping it alive. If you are single, your ability to create trust can draw people toward you, but attraction does not automatically mean compatibility. You may notice chemistry quickly, yet your deeper task is to learn who someone is beyond the first impression. Give yourself time to observe how they communicate, how they handle boundaries, how they respond when things become uncomfortable, and whether their behavior supports the qualities they claim to value. You do not have to rush simply because a connection feels unusual. Let curiosity remain part of the experience and allow another person to reveal themselves through consistency rather than through promises alone. Love involves two emotional realities, not one. So mutual agreement matters even when two people move at different speeds. Chemistry can open the door, but trust is what tells you whether you actually want to walk through it. Family relationships may also become an important place for deeper understanding. Conversations that have been avoided can create opportunities to recognize old patterns, especially when you begin responding from your present self instead of reacting from the history you share with someone. You may understand certain relatives differently when you allow yourself to see the fears, limitations, and generational beliefs that shape them without taking responsibility for repairing everything they carry. Your presence can help create more emotional openness at home, but remember that being loving does not mean becoming responsible for everyone's emotional state. Small gestures can matter: a sincere conversation, a moment of patience, an acknowledgement of something that has gone unsaid. These moments can strengthen bonds while also allowing you to maintain the boundaries that protect your own peace. There may be different perspectives within your family, and those differences do not automatically need to become conflicts. Sometimes growth means accepting that people can love one another deeply while still seeing life through completely different lenses, shaped by their own histories, fears, and experiences. You do not have to convince everyone to understand the changes happening within you. and you do not have to defend every decision simply because someone else would choose differently. Let your own transformation become visible through the way you communicate, listen, and respond, allowing your behavior to speak more clearly than any attempt to make everyone change with you. Your overall energy feels moderate and deliberate, almost like water that has settled after being stirred. You may not feel completely peaceful, but you also do not seem overwhelmed by excitement, urgency, or the need to make everything happen immediately, and that middle ground can actually work in your favor. There is enough emotional flexibility here for you to observe what is happening without immediately resisting it, especially if you give yourself permission to pause before reacting. Sometimes the most useful thing you can do is create a little space between what you feel and what you decide to do with that feeling. One of your strengths is your ability to think deeply, notice subtle shifts, and recognize patterns that others may overlook. You can sense when something feels different, even before you have all the words to explain why. But that sensitivity becomes most useful when you give it room to breathe, rather than allowing it to become constant analysis. Intelligence does not mean you have to process everything alone either. There are moments when another perspective can help you separate genuine intuition from an old fear, wearing the disguise of certainty, and allowing trustworthy people to support you does not weaken your independence. Sometimes wisdom arrives through a conversation you were willing to have when you could have chosen to keep everything locked inside. Be mindful of withdrawal that comes from fear, rather than a genuine need for privacy. There is a meaningful difference between taking space because you are gathering yourself and disappearing because you are afraid of what might happen if you become visible, vulnerable, or fully honest about what you need. Scorpio energy can value privacy because depth requires discernment, but privacy should still leave a door available for the people who have earned your trust. If fear keeps you inside the same familiar emotional room for too long, eventually even a place that once felt safe can begin to feel like a cage, quietly narrowing your world while convincing you that you are simply protecting yourself. Take your time, but do not let waiting become another form of avoidance. If you notice yourself analyzing the same situation repeatedly, turning every detail over in your mind without taking any meaningful step, move something gently rather than demanding an immediate transformation. Ask the question you have been postponing. Make the decision you already know you need to consider change one part of the routine. Have the honest conversation, or release one expectation that has kept you suspended between what was and what could be. You do not have to force the future open or control how another person responds. You simply need to remain willing to participate in your own life and allow your choices to create movement where uncertainty has kept you still. For students, the same principle applies to concentration. Your attention may be pulled toward other emotional concerns, especially if someone has caught your interest and you find yourself checking their posts, studying their reactions, or wondering what every small signal might mean. A curious mind can become absorbed in the smallest details when feelings are involved, and suddenly a few minutes of checking becomes a long stretch of mental energy spent somewhere else. Notice when curiosity is quietly crossed into distraction, because your future deserves more attention than a digital trail of someone else's behavior, especially when that behavior may not even tell you what you think it does. Create a schedule, give your studies a protected place in your day, and allow yourself to return to those emotional questions later. You can care about someone without allowing that person to occupy every corner of your attention. And you can feel deeply without needing to investigate every silence or decode every online gesture. Balance is not about shutting your feelings down or pretending you are unaffected. It is about making sure those feelings do not quietly take control of choices that matter to your future. Let your emotions have a seat at the table, but do not hand them the keys to every decision. In terms of compatibility, Pisces may bring a gentle, emotional understanding that allows you to soften without feeling exposed too quickly. There can be something soothing about a connection where sensitivity does not have to be explained at every turn, while Capricorn can offer steadiness, practical focus, and a sense of structure that helps turn complicated ideas into something tangible. Scorpio energy with another Scorpio may feel especially intense and emotionally perceptive, almost like two people recognizing a language beneath the spoken words, creating a strong sense of familiarity and depth. Yet that same depth works best when both people are willing to communicate rather than silently interpret one another. Because two highly perceptive people can still misunderstand each other when assumptions are allowed to fill the quiet spaces. These connections are symbolic tendencies, not guarantees about individual people or promises about how a particular relationship will unfold. The most important factor remains how two people actually behave together, how safely they communicate, how they handle disagreement, and whether their values can meet in a meaningful way. Familiarity can be powerful, but familiarity alone is not always compatibility. Just as intense chemistry does not automatically create emotional safety. What matters is whether someone can meet you with enough honesty and consistency that you do not have to spend your time searching beneath the surface for reassurance. Scorpio, as you move through August 17, 2026, the deeper message is less about forcing an answer and more about becoming willing to recognize the answer when reality gives it to you. You do not have to chase clarity, and you do not have to manufacture certainty by analyzing every silence, rereading every conversation, or trying to predict what someone will do next. Sometimes the clearest truth arrives quietly, through a pattern that repeats itself, an action that finally matches the words, or a feeling within you that becomes calmer once you stop trying to control the story. Let what is real have enough room to reveal itself. Your path is still yours to shape, and no reading can make a decision in your place. What this reflection can offer is another way of looking at the patterns around you, especially the places where you may be holding on, because something is familiar rather than because it is still nourishing you. There is a difference between loyalty and remaining attached to an old version of a person. Just as there is a difference between patience and postponing what you already know needs attention. Let your intuition speak, let your boundaries speak, and most importantly, let people's actions have enough space to speak for themselves. Because you may discover that you need less explanation when reality is allowed to show you what words cannot. If this message gave you a moment of clarity, you can support the channel through the link in the description or the QR code on the screen. Your support helps this space continue creating thoughtful readings for people who want astrology to be a place for reflection rather than pressure. A place where you can pause and consider your own experience without feeling that you have to accept every message as a fixed prediction. And if you choose to stay connected for future readings, remember that the value of any message is ultimately found in how thoughtfully you use it in your own life. Take what resonates, reflect on what challenges you, and let your own judgment remain part of the process. Thank you to everyone who supports this space. Whether you share your thoughts, listen quietly, return when you need perspective, or simply spend a few moments reflecting with us, your presence helps shape this community in ways that may be quiet but still deeply meaningful. Every person brings a different story, and that is part of what makes these reflections worth having. May you continue to move with enough courage to face what is true, enough patience to let what remains hidden reveal itself in its own way, and enough self-respect to choose what allows your life to keep unfolding with greater honesty, deeper trust, and a clearer sense of who you are becoming.